According to the Manila Times, horticulturists had expressed the opinion that the petals belonged to a foreign species of rose. And an article in a foreign magazine called The Scapular stated that the petals were tested in the laboratories of a famous American university and reported that the petals belonged to a Russian species of rose. Some of the petals were found to contain images of the Sacred Heart, of the Virgin and Child, of the Holy Family, of the Head of Christ, of Saint Joseph, and many others. Petals which thousands of devotees have preserved over the years. Strangely enough, the petals have not crumbled despite the passage of 40+ years. A closer look reveals the petal veins to be unbroken.
Nung matagal na, sabi ko, tingnan ko nga itong petal ko. Aba, nung aking tignan ng petal, meron. Hay, sabi ko, meron akong mga image ang petal.
There are other testimonies of people who claim to have found petals in their clothes, prayer books, and homes. Sister Amelia Fernandez, who lived in Haro, Iloilo, had prayed and asked God to give her a petal. She found two, one in her prayer book and the other while riding on a jeepney. These she pressed in her missal.
After pressing it around 6 o'clock in the afternoon, I saw two hearts. One heart pierced with the sword, and the one is with the cross with this sign.
Thousands of requests for petals poured into the convent every day, sometimes even from as far as Mindanao. The demand for petals was so great and the supply so scarce that the Carmelite outsisters had to resort to raffles and to distributing bottles of water in which the petals had been dipped. There was even at the time a group loosely called the Carmel Boys, who helped distribute the water and formed a choir for the masses. But while the petal showers continued to be the main attraction, so to speak, much attention also began to focus on the statue of the Mediatrix of All Grace, which reportedly moved inside its glass case.
Bigla hong nagsigawan ang tao, mayroon hong naiyak pa at hagulhulan. Di napatingin po ako sa Mahal na Birhen. Nakita kong biglang-bigla na ang mata niya ay nakatitig sa malayo.
Na-witness ko rin po ang pag-ibo ng rosary sa kamay ng Blessed Virgin. Parang umiisod pong parang siya po ay nagro-rosary.
The image of the Virgin was encased in glass. And there were two vases of flowers beside the image, lilies and azucenas. I saw the flowers moving to and fro, swaying as if it was being moved by hand. But the rosary didn't move. The curtain at the back didn't move at all. And there were other people who saw that, especially the children.
I saw the flowers moving in all directions without moving the stem. So I felt as if my hair were going up. Then it stopped. After a while, that happened in the right side of the Virgin. Then on the left side, the other flower pot there with Azucena started to move the same direction, in all directions. Because if it were being influenced by the wind, it will just move in one direction. But he was moving in all directions.
On Good Friday, April 1949, there were reports that images of the crucified Christ and his sorrowing mother appeared on the aluminum sheet used to cover the statue in accordance with Lenten church rites. In May 1949, the national dailies reported that hundreds of people from San Pablo, Laguna, had seen Mary, Mediatrix of All Grace, appear briefly in the sky above Sampaloc Lake, just as they were about to embark on a fluvial procession of her image, the exact replica of that in Lipa.
Our Lady appeared in the sky, reflected in the lake.
Sister Celine Gutierrez, then a young girl who had not yet entered Carmel, looked up in the sky and saw
The image of Our Lady white, exactly.
How big was she?
It's just smaller than our statue, no? Because it was so high.
But apparently, the mediatrix was also seen in other parts of the Philippines. There were reports that many had seen her in the San Agustin Cathedral of Cagayan de Oro City. Nieves Gonzalez Gabucan recalls the day she squeezed her way into the fully packed church with her husband and family.
All of a sudden, on the right side of the Sacred Heart of Jesus from the wall, I saw a light. And that light, it was just light. Then I was surprised the light was approaching me. And it became the image on the whole figure of a beautiful lady clad with white garments and her feet resting on a piece of cloud. And she was beautiful and sad. And I was looking at her. Everything was quiet. The time when I saw that, everything was quiet, as if I was alone on a meadow. And my heart was so light, and I could not describe in words how I felt, as if I was elevated, a little. She appeared maybe around 10 seconds or 15 seconds or so. I looked at her from head to foot. And when I said, "Mary, mediatrix of all graces," she smiled a little, and then she went backward slowly, and growing shorter and shorter and shorter until she disappeared from the same wall where she came from. And when she disappeared, all the noise of the church, my husband, my kids were pulling out my skirt. Where is it? Where is it? They were so noisy. And I was so dumbfounded, I could not tell them, because I thought that they saw the same thing. So I didn't need to tell them anything. But I was surprised when I saw that image. Nobody was around, as if I was alone in that time. I said, "All of you have not seen?" "Oh, I thought you have seen too." Then my husband told me, "Why did you not touch me?" I said, "Why? How could I touch you? You were not around. When I saw it, all of you disappeared. I was just alone."
In May and July 1949, other petal showers were reported to have occurred in other districts of Manila, in private residences where replicas of the mediatrix were enshrined. Aside from a rather stupendous array of seemingly supernatural events and the remarkable, almost instantaneous conversions, there was yet what seemed to be an added grace, for reports began to surface that the petals of Lipa were effecting miraculous cures. Socorro Mendoza Dichoso was born to Dr. Telesforo Mendoza and Rosario Cosme on December 1948 at the height of the celebrated petal showers of Lipa. The baby had a soft swelling on the left side of her head, which increased in size as time passed. Subsequent x-rays taken by Dr. Paulino Garcia later revealed a hole in the child's skull, more than 2 inches in diameter, causing her cranial membranes to protrude. Their only protective covering was the scalp. In medical terms, it was diagnosed as a case of deficient ossification of the cranium with consequent protrusion of the membranes containing cerebrospinal fluid.
My brain was like parang very soft, like a coconut, young coconut. When if you put your hands, it will really enter.
Dr. Mendoza told his wife that the case was very serious and that the only remedy lay in sending the infant for treatment abroad.
She can die any moment. I went to Lipa, there in Mediatrix. I went to the sisters of the Carmelite sisters there, and the superior gave me a petal.
Mrs. Rosario Mendoza began a novena to Our Lady Mediatrix of All Grace. Socorro, in the meantime, grew worse, and on January 28, 1949, she fell into a deep stupor, which her father feared was a symptom of meningitis.
At around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there was no life anymore.
I put the petal in her here. Afterwards, by my husband looked at her. Oh, no, it's no more. With the petal there, the brain has succeeded. And then we ran again to Dr. Paulino Garcia for the x-ray. And then Dr. Garcia said, "What did you do?"
They do not know what happened. Biglang wala na eh.
The x-rays reportedly showed, impossible as it might seem, that the cavity in the skull had closed.
And I looked him up, Dr. Mendoza. And I interviewed him, and he gave me the copies of the x-rays before and after when there was this hole in the child's head, and then when it magically suddenly disappeared, miraculously disappeared. And I remember even that I was moved as far as a young, idealistic, perhaps trying to be cynical or hardball journalist could be moved, to the extent that when the UST joined an oratorical contest, and I was asked to help in the writing of a piece for the UST contestant, I chose The Miracle of Lipa as my theme, and it won first prize,
The copies of Socorro's x-rays are unfortunately no longer with the Mendozas. They were supposedly brought to Rome to substantiate the authenticity of the events at Lipa. Another case in point is that of Nieves Gabucan's mother.
My mother was so weak. She was just skin and bones, and the doctor said she would just live 1 week. She's going to die, and she's too old to be operated because she has something like a defect in the heart or whatever was that. They could not understand what the sickness is. So I went there. I prayed to Our Mary, Mediatrix of All Graces. I went. I did not see her anymore. Actually, like what I did in San Agustin Cathedral in Cagayan de Oro. But when I arrived in Manila, what I did was put the petals in a bottle and put some oil, coconut oil. And then I told my mom, I said, I have gone to Lipa. I have asked for your life for 10 years more. I asked God for 10 years more for you to live. So I put, "O Mary, conceive without sin, pray for us of recourse to thee." But at the same time, I made a cross with the oil in my hands. And then I brought this statue that I bought from Lipa and placed it at the head beside my mother. I gave her a rosary.
That same afternoon, Nieves' mother was able to take in food for the first time in a week, and to the amazement of the doctors, rapidly recovered her health in a matter of days.
She got well. She lived for 10 years.
On the 17th of February, 1949, a 5-month-old baby, Rosalina Fundan, was brought to the clinic of Dr. Ricardo Raimundo in San Pablo City, Laguna. Suffering from convulsions and a distended abdomen, her condition had deteriorated so much so that her pulse vanished completely. When medication had failed, the doctor then thought of applying a carmel petal on the child's abdomen, and after 12 minutes, her pulse returned to normal. Dr. Raimundo states that he is inclined to believe that this is a supernatural cure. In May 1949, Dr. Florentino Romero of Laguna applied a petal to her 8-month-old daughter Thelma, who suffered from a case of intestinal obstruction. The doctor also started a novena to Our Lady Mediatrix of All Grace. The child was scheduled for operation, but the attending physician at the last moment decided not to proceed, for Thelma apparently recovered and the mass which had begun to form vanished. On December 24th, 1950, a local magazine carried an article by Father Martin Casey, S.J., then head of the chemistry department of the Jesuit-run Ateneo University. In it, he relates that after administering the last sacraments to a girl dying of cerebral hemorrhage in Misamis Oriental, he applied a lipa petal to her forehead, and upon the ringing of the Angelus bell, the girl suddenly emerged from her deep stupor as if nothing had happened. Another case is that of Felix Bautista's father.
My father had a brain tumor, and he had gone progressively blind to the point that when I brought him there, he was completely sightless. And I remember wiping his eyes with some of the water from there. And then the night after we came back to Manila, I was helping him, he wanted to exercise a little, so we were walking back and forth. After supper, we were walking back and forth in our driveway. And suddenly, says, there is the moon. And he could see that light up there. And before that, it had been complete darkness.
Water which was bottled or in which petals were dipped and placed beside the image at Lipa reportedly also had miraculous healing powers. One undeniably outstanding cure, simply because the result was visible to all, was that of Melania Maria Sunga. She was born in 1940 with a deformed right foot, the sole of which was curled up, in her own words, like the cooked shrimps her mother had been so fond of. Her foot was so deformed that she was never able to wear a pair of shoes or slippers. Moreover, her leg had atrophied, shortened, and from disuse, wasted away to almost skin and bone. She moved about by jumping and limping, and was seen by the entire town as she painfully made her way to school. In 1949, when she was 9 years old, her uncle, now Monsignor Edmundo Abaya, then still a seminarian, brought the family a bottle of water which had been placed overnight beside the statue of Mary Mediatrix at Carmel Lipa. Mrs. Sunga, a daily churchgoer, offered prayers and sacrifice and rubbed her daughter's crooked foot with the water from Lipa every day for several weeks. One morning, Melania awoke and walked to the bathroom. To her family's amazement, her foot had straightened out and her leg had become perfectly normal. The cure caused a sensation. People from all over began to stream into the Sunga residence. Relatives, friends, priests, religious, and even total strangers came to see the child who had been healed by the water of Lipa. Some days afterwards, neighbors began to remark on the incredible fragrance of flowers that filled their surroundings, and the inhabitants of the Sunga household were stunned by a shower of petals that fell within their home. Today, Melania Sunga is able to don footwear and walk about like any ordinary person. She is now with the religious of the Assumption. But apparently, even prayers in front of the statue of the Mediatrix also produced wonders. In February 1949, the newspapers carried the story of Dominga Arellano, a 56-year-old crippled beggar able to move about only on hands and knees, who claimed that after she had prayed before the lady's image at Carmel, suddenly found that she could stand and walk. But the impact of Lipa was not confined to the Philippines. The petals found their way abroad, and accounts of cures in other countries poured into Carmel.
Many letters that I was asked to answer, and really there are many cures, even London, even the States, many parts in the world.
43 years later, those petals continue to circulate, and cures persist to this day. Then, the Virgin of Lipa went international. A replica of the Mediatrix was flown to Madrid, Spain, where she was borne in procession amidst crowds of enthusiastic devotees. In August of 1949, the statue was brought to the United States by Dr. Genero Vidal, cousin of Bishop Versosa of Lipa, and as they disembarked at LaGuardia Airport in New York, the fragrance of roses reportedly swept over the crowd who had burst through the guard lines and swarmed around the plane at the airfield. This was published in a national Catholic magazine, and we quote, "The people on the field were so moved by this extraordinary experience that they could not be cleared from the runway for some time. The airline found it impossible to move the big 4-engine transoceanic airplane. At last the crowd was persuaded to leave the area when the statue itself was carried into the baggage room. There they formed a cordon about the statue, standing on the baggage counter, and all said the rosary in unison for the next 15 minutes. A few days later, the statue was triumphantly carried in procession on 2nd Avenue of one of the most progressive cities of the world by a crowd of more than 3,000 New Yorkers."
Our Lady had hit the big time, so to speak. Mediatrix had made it to the Big Apple. What then happened to Lipa? How is it that so extraordinary a phenomenon remains today only a vague memory in the minds of a few, and dismissed as a hoax by later generations? Do join us for our next episode, where we feature the second half of our story, the investigation and pronouncement of the Catholic Church, and the intriguing events at Carmel that continue to fascinate those who have not forgotten Lipa. Till then, this is June Keithley for the 5th of the series of The Woman Clothed with a Sun.
Full of people whom I could sense a certain deep and abiding